Right, peace, everybody. In this discussion, we're going to go through the concept of ego and how to kill it, mainly. And we'll look at it from two angles. Well, one angle, the Quranic angle, but we'll also explore scientific, let's say, explanations on these parts. And also, one that captivated me was the Shia perspective of the seven nafs of the soul. And when we go through the verses, it should help. It should clarify the positions. Okay, let's begin sharing my screen. Let's see PowerPoint. Tell me if you guys can see that. Go to the live. So we've got 3 spectators now. Everybody should be joining it. 6. Oh wait, a little bit more. 4, 6, 8. Few people, maybe they're AFK. 9. So anyone else on VC3, you need to click on the stream so that you can see the presentation. Right, we'll just begin now. I think we've got sufficient. Yeah, if you wanna interject or ask question, just ask throughout. There's no like make or break here. Just feel free. You're among brothers and sisters. The only other thing I ask is that if you do have background noise or a device that doesn't have auto mute or something like that, please mute yourself. Brother Abdullah,
Hey, Abdullah, do you mind muting yourself? There's a background noise coming from your mic.
Right, we explored this last week, but I'll go through it briefly. It's not a super important thing, but it's the perspective of psychology. So when God commands us to kill the ego, this is to kill the nafs. In psychological perspective, they say that there's a balance, kind of like heaven and hell kind of balance. You've got the id here, which is all your pleasure-seeking elements, and then you've got the super ego here, which is the one that strives to do good. Ultimately, you are balancing this ego, right? You are the person in between. So for example, when God gives you a commandment, almost everyone here is thinking or believing that we are the humans, right? No one here thinks they're the jinn companion. Yet the voices in your head are eternally debating. When you make a decision or when you arrive at any understanding, whether to serve God or to deviate from the path of God, you have this debate in your head. The whispers that say commit sin, idolize, so on, and the other voice that says no, God is enough for me. But if you think about it, that conversation happens between two parties, and somehow you are in there, right? You are in control of both voices. So it's important to understand that you are the sum of those voices, right? And everyone identifies themselves as the righteous, but realistically we are not all righteous. We have sinful traits. That's why we are here, right? We have idolatry within us. We have indecision within us. And so this challenge is to balance yourself in a way that you do good in the most practical way possible, right? And if you contain yourself as this idealistic, perfect creature on the right here, angelic, let's say, then you carry a lot of guilt within yourself. The system punishes itself. If you do something wrong, for example, once, or anything, let's say you wake up with a headache, and you thought you were pristine the day before or the week or that day, whatever the case is, right? And then all of a sudden you're going to self-blame and you're going to really, really inject a lot of maybe guilt or your conscience that's going to attack yourself. And what you need to do is you need to balance that idea that, right, something's happened today, whatever small matter, I have a headache, I tripped, something fell, and you need to be introspective, right? Understand it for what it is, which is God's way of communicating with you to tell you what you have done wrong or where you may be defective in your practices. And equally, if you're on this left-hand side and you just want to follow your impulses, right, whatever it may be, some impulses are physical, sexual, some people have impulses that glorify their ego, right? The need to be seen, the need to present, the need to be, let's say, overcome others and say, oh, I'm better. All of these impulses. And if you extend yourself beyond this, obviously the hellfire awaits. But it's also important that we recognize these impulses. We recognize when an idea enters our brain, right? So for example, today, it's a very weird experience, but I'm going to share it. I was out doing some gym exercise. It's a baby gym exercise. I wasn't doing the exercise, though I feel like I got more workout than my daughter. We went to the cafe, and then some lady sat next to me. It was weird. It was. I had my pram and everything was in the way, but she decided to sit in the most awkward place possible. So I was like, fine, I'll give you path. She sat down. And as we left, she left. And I was like, that's weird. What was that about? And I had a moment of doubt or suspicion in my mind. And I'm particularly suspicious as a person and sensitive as well. And the moment you have something like that, you should seek refuge in God from Shaitan the rejected, right? Because Rashad says that you shouldn't be suspicious of other people. These negative thoughts that enter your mind, whatever it may be, you have tools within you to reset and beset the idea from your mind. So for me, particularly, I read Surah 23, 97 and 98, I believe. ربي أعوذ بك من همزات وأعوذ بك ربي أعوذ بك من همزات الشياطين وأعوذ بك ربي أن يحضرون, which is, I seek refuge in you, my Lord, from the whispers of the devil, and my Lord, I seek refuge in you, lest they come near me, right? So that's a good prayer to have as you have these ideas in your mind. The moment you have it, say that, and it's trying to repel the devil, and it's from the Quran, so it's a good exercise. Let's move on. So in 254, recall that Moses said to his people, O my people, you have wronged your souls by worshipping the calf. You must repent to your Creator. You shall kill your egos. This is better for you in the sight of your Creator. He did redeem you. He is the Redeemer, most merciful. So the Arabic here is faqtulu anfusakum, and the commandment here is a continuous commandment. Killing your ego isn't a single exercise, because if you could just kill your ego, you would wake up one day and have no ego, right? You would just browse through the day. The moment someone impugns on your perceived authority or calmness or state of zen, you'd be just completely unfazed, and it would be like water off a duck's back. But reality obviously strikes, and it's not true. This is a persistent and continuous effort. And so this, if God is saying that it is to kill your ego, and I remember in the last week's event, Sister Kato raised a good question, which is, if you kill your ego, and this ego is a part of you, are you killing effectively yourself? And the answer is yes and no. You are killing yourself, that is sinful, that is egotistical, that is, trying to override God's command. But this isn't who you are, right? You are not the sum of your sins. You are not the things you've done wrong in your past. You are not your ego, right? You are not who you think you are today, for that matter. Because if today you had something happen and someone told you something that you were mistaken, or you were maybe slightly dismayed by how you presented yourself, or whatever the case may be, right? Let's say your ego did die in that instance, one part of it. The tomorrow version of you is a better version of you, because it recognizes that today I failed. I didn't give space for my counterpart to speak their truth. I didn't listen. I didn't project myself well, whatever the case may be, right? And if you were able to kill your ego effectively, tomorrow the version of you then is who you are, right? Closer to who you are, or who you want to be. I'm going to mute you, Brother Abdullah. I can hear background noise. Sorry. So does that make sense thus far? This verse is obviously the entire discussion point, killing your egos. Are we happy with that?
Brother, I thought maybe if you wanted to do a presentation and then we can do some discussion. I had something to share, but I'd like to, have you carry out your train of thought, not interrupt, and then when.
That's fair. That's fair, brother Peter. No worries. What was your point, Brother Peter?
No, I was just saying, praise God. It's good info.
Cool. Let's continue. In 429, God says, O you who believe, do not consume each other's properties illicitly. Only mutually acceptable transactions are permitted. You shall not kill yourselves. Right. So this is the same wording. Taqtulu anfusakum. Anfusakum is your egos, like it's a plural reference to the nafas. Nunfasa is the root for this word, and here it's clearly talking about a physical act, and it's a ceasing activity. It's not continuous. If you kill yourself, that's end game, right? Your body is terminated. This is a gross sin. So we have to be cautious when we read the Quran. When God is giving us a commandment, we have to recognize that some commandments are continuous in nature. So for example, when God says obey God and obey the messenger, this is a continuous commandment. Just because the messenger died doesn't mean that the message died with him, right? And how do you obey the message? That's an illogical statement. You follow what was given to you as guidance and a reminder, but you obey the person that gave it to you. God decided that in his system that people will be the people that transfer the truth of God. So, for example, if my dad gave me a message, do this, whatever it may be, once he dies, if I carry out that message, if he says, be righteous or always be equitable. For example, my dad said to me when I was younger, the whole world could believe in something and the whole world could be wrong, right? It's just a point. But it resonated with me so long that it made me realize that you could be in a room of people that are telling you that you are false, you're wrong, you're mistaken, and you could still be right. Because truth is not decided by how many people believe it, as we know. Truth is decided by truth, right? What is more reasonable, what is more likely. And ultimately you have to decide that for yourself. But the point I'm making is, if you continue to obey the message or the messenger, that person giving you that commandment, even after his death, you are still obeying him, right? So just recognize the state of affairs, that this is a continuous exercise, killing your ego. So I won't go into this one because it's just talking more about the grammar of yaqtulu, which is to kill yourself. But basically this portion at the bottom here, these two last verses are basically talking about a physical act. But Rashad translated it perfectly up here, where it's talking about, let's say, a spiritual act, right? And it's a continuous exercise. Just another point. Sorry, I've got like a nose block or something. Just another point here. It's also, again, that root word I was talking about, nafas. So it can mean several things. It could mean your breath, it can mean your soul, and it could also mean desire, which is very interesting, right? If you look up the concordance of this word, you will see all three references. You will see nafas as breath, nafsu as a desire, and anfusakum as the self, the soul. So it's just beautiful that the Arabic has this kind of root terminology that kind of manifests in its state of linearity. It all kind of sings from the same hymn sheet. So this is another verse that talks about the soul again, nafsan, and we do not Auzubillah Shaitan Rajim 6152. We do not burden any soul beyond its means. The takeaway from this is that this is a commandment, right? When God says something in the Quran, it happens, right? Kun fayakun, be and it is. So when God is saying a soul cannot be burdened beyond its means, we do not burden a soul beyond its means. The moment you see someone that you think is burdened beyond their means, either their soul is not there or that's not the limit, right? So we have to be absolutely conscious of God stating what is the truth. And again, this sort of whole presentation is more about trying to identify and delineate ego from the self. And you can look at it from a psychological perspective. I also like to think of it as a conversation in my head, which is that I'd like to think anyway that there are two parties in my head that's always having a discussion. And there's a term called aphantasia where there are no discussions happening. I don't know how that applies to the companion, but certainly there are people that cannot even project an idea or think of an apple or anything along those lines. And when you project something into the future, what you tend to do is you tend to create, you manifest the reality that is not yet happened. So when you think about an eventuality, let's say I'm thinking about debating a person, or I'm scared to ask a question, or whatever the case may be, you're having a conversation in your head, and you have to be acutely aware of the conversations you're having in your head, right? The moment you're telling yourself, I don't know if this is the right time, you have to think, is it the right time? And as you're thinking if it's the right time, you have to be aware that that's the other person telling yourself that is it the right time. And you are in a continuous swirl of discussion in your head. And it's a beautiful system that we can have this discussion with ourselves. And ultimately to be able to kill your ego is to be able to identify that you are not the most knowledgeable, that you are not who you are or who you project yourself to be today. So this is the verse that I wanted to refer to that Sister Kata mentioned. So I'll talk about this one first. So this is an interesting one. It's a Shia concept, but I've given where I can references in the Quran. So the idea is that you start at level 1 and then you go to level 7, right? This is the purity of your soul. So in in level 1, you have nafs al-amara bisu. So this is the base level of the soul, which is driven by desires and impulses. It commands its possessor towards selfishness, materialism, and evil. The focus at this stage is recognizing these lower impulses and beginning the process of resistance. It involves becoming aware of one's weaknesses and the ways in which the ego leads to sinful behavior. So I don't know. I feel like that already applies to me. I feel like I'm already in level 1, where you have to constantly be aware of your weakness, right? Some people, they, like Sister was saying prior in the Quran study, they might be eager to gossip, right? Or for me, it would be eager to share my doings or my achievements, right? Or eager to prove someone wrong, or eager to prove myself right. These are egotistical traits, and I'm being commanded by myself, right? And it's a very, I guess, confusing statement to make. But I'm not commanding the spirit is not commanding the body, but the body is commanding the self. When I want to eat, I eat. When I want to do some sinful thing, I do it, right? So I'm not there. And we have a reference on this in 1253. I'll just read it. I do not claim innocence for myself. The self is an advocate of vice, except for those who have attained mercy from my Lord. My Lord is forgiver, most merciful. So you can see here that we do advocate for vice, right? It's natural within us. Otherwise, we would be in perfect paradise in God's kingdom, 100% in perfect peace. But at least for myself, I still have some elements of strife, albeit it's far removed from where I was before submission. Praise God. So level 2 of nafs al-lawama, or the self-accusing self. Now, once you start recognizing that you have all these weaknesses, you go to level 2. At this stage, the individual becomes conscious of their faults and imperfections, leading to self-reproach and regret. The focus at this stage marks the beginning of spiritual awakening. This is the spark within you, where the soul starts to blame itself for failing to meet higher ethical and spiritual standards. It is a sign of increased awareness and a desire to improve. So here in the Quranic reference 75:52, let me just bring that up. Oh, it does exactly say that. And I swear by the blaming soul. Walasimu bin nafsil lawamati. So at this point, you start seeing that you are failing, right? But the problem is, it's going back to that super ego element in the beginning, where you're highly critical of yourself, right? And this is, you want to improve, but if you're too critical of yourself, you could be basically frozen in inaction, right? You could be in a state of stasis where you can't move forward. There's a term here, Brother Peter, I think you can help me. I think it's when you're inundated with choices, you make no choices. What is it called?
Paralysis?
Yes. Well, there's a preceding word, but it is.
There's paradox of choice and decision paralysis.
That's the one I was thinking of. You reach a state of decision paralysis, and thank you for that, brother. If you're in this state where you're self-blaming, right, you could reach a paralytic moment where you can't move forward. And God willing, we go to level 3 here, nafs al-mulhama, the inspired self. At this point, the soul starts to incline towards good and receives divine inspiration. It becomes more susceptible to righteousness and guides by its developing conscience. The individual seeks to follow the inspiration towards better actions and spiritual growth, listening to inner voice that guides them towards piety. 91:8. I just need to make sure this is the correct Rashad translation. So Rashad reads, then showed it what is evil and what is good. So at this point, you are more susceptible to God's message. And this is what I was saying, when you have a headache or whatever, you're understanding that there's some lacking in you, right? Some, I don't want to say wickedness. God willing, we're all here striving to the path of God, but potentially it's there. And we go to the 4th stage, nafs al-mutma'inna, the satisfied self. So you can see here, you're commanded by your body. You start blaming yourself. You start being inspired, and now you start being satisfied. The soul finds peace and satisfaction in God, reassured and content with divine judgment and decree, achieving peace and tranquility by trusting in God's wisdom, being less swayed by worldly desires. It signifies a deepening of faith and reliance on God. O satisfied soul, return to your Lord, well pleased and pleasing. I remember this verse. Well pleased and pleasing to Him, right? That is such a beautiful reference, where you are pleased to meet your Lord and you are pleasing to Him, right? Because you have purified yourself of not only sinful actions but sinful thoughts, because you've grown your spirit so much that your ego is no longer binding you to this world, right? Your ego is not who you are. So let's just look up that verse just to ensure the translation is correct. And 28, I have to go 27 only. O content soul, return to your Lord, pleased and pleasing. Yeah, so that's perfect as well. And then we get to the fifth stage. At this point, you start thinking, how can I go higher, right? But you can. Nafs al-radiyah. This is why it's a perpetual thing. Don't think that as you get to seventh point that you're, accomplished. This is a perpetual action. The content self. The soul is pleased with whatever comes its way, fully content with God's will. And this reflects a deeper understanding, contentment with God's plan and tests. The individual is at peace with whatever God decrees, showing complete trust and acceptance. This one I couldn't find a verse, but this is basically us following the will of God, right? Seek not my will. This is a reference in the Bible actually, but the will of my Father. And when you believe that God is in control of everything, then you understand that you are this. The way I like to think of it is that God is in control of all mechanical elements in the universe, right? But He has enjoined you as a spirit. You get to witness and make choices on what you choose to believe, right? So imagine you're in a car, the car being your body. You are inside this car and you have a passenger, by the way, who's yabbering at you, as they all do. And apologies for that, that was unnecessary. And you are the person, and in the car you have few controls, right? And one button you've got believe, don't believe, right? The other button is be righteous, don't be righteous. Be equitable, don't be equitable. Tell the truth, don't tell the truth. But the reality of life is that 99.9999999, an infinite amount of times, is under absolute control by God. Everything would have happened the way it would have happened. The only difference would have been that in that car, you either chose to believe, for example, if God said fight in war and you chose to stay at home, in that car you're choosing to disbelieve, right? And if you were to die, you would have crawled into your deathbed. If God decreed that it was your destiny to die, you would have crawled into your deathbed. So the destiny that has been prescribed for you is immutable and unchangeable. But you have the choice to make these decisions in the car, in your soul, to decide that I choose at this moment, when I hear this whisper, to seek refuge in God from the whispers of the devil. I choose in this moment, when I get these ideas that there are doubts or my understanding is slightly different or lacking, I choose to believe that God is one and that I am obeying the messenger and therefore obeying God. Right. Did I get to number 5? Yes, number 5 is basically you're at peace with the flow, the ebb and flow of reality, right? And at this point, you completely surrender to God's will. Number 6, the pleasing self. The soul becomes pleasing to God, actively seeking to fulfill God's will, becoming beloved to God due to its virtues and devotion, striving to live in a life that pleases God beyond mere acceptance, by engaging in actions that earn divine pleasure. So in the Quranic reference, this the return to your Lord, well pleased and pleasing. We've read that again. And at this point, you engage in a perpetual battle to represent God, right? So this is for me a moment of striving, right? You need to constantly delete your ego, and your ego isn't going to be killed by just being at home, talking amongst your peers or your partner or your kids, right? Your ego can only be killed when you are in conflict with another person that presents to you a fact that you did not know, a truth that you could not accept, a reality that you couldn't swallow, right? So if you are not striving, if you are sedentary and you're just sticking up happy with your prayers and everything else, you could not be at this level. You could not actively seek to fulfill God's will, right? The moment I see a conversation have the minutest chance of injecting God's message, I do it, God willing, right? Whether it's to my colleagues, whether it's to my peers, whether it's to my partner, or any reference. It's hard, and I still am lacking in that department. But if you don't even start, if you don't, join the group chats or the debates, where are you in the fulfillment of God's will, right? Is he who strives better than he, not better than he who is sedentary? So we have to be aware of that we are representing the truth of God, and we are against rejectors, right? Disbelievers. How dare they refute and reject God himself, Almighty, the Most High. And you wouldn't tolerate that if someone insulted your mother or your father, right? And this is worse than that, manifold. This is the creator of the universe. And there are many of these rejectors, and we must be firm. So at this point, you're, God willing, striving and continuously engaging to kill your ego. And I'm reminding you, at least from my perspective, that this doesn't happen naturally, typically, right? The probability of you encountering something that kills your ego naturally is low. But the more you engage people that have contradicting views or better views, understanding than you, the more likely you are to have to choose to kill your egos. It's unpleasant, extremely unpleasant experience to have that happen. But it's what happens when you kill something. And finally, the pure self. The soul is completely purified and free from all impurities, experiencing a constant state of remembrance of God and detachment from worldly matters, achieving ultimate spiritual purity and unity with the divine. It represents the highest level of spiritual development where the soul is entirely devoted to God. Again, this isn't mentioned in the Quran, but you know there are verses in the Quran where God says he seeks to purify you, right? And this is true. When we were created, we were created from his hands, right? I believe it's a Quran thing, not a hadith thing, where he breathed into us, right? Our soul. So we are a part of him. We are now creation, so we cannot be the creator. But to be near the creator, we have to be purified. The way I like to think about this is the Matrix, right? Neo was the source code, and he is this, I don't know if anyone here watched the Matrix, but basically for him to, it's part of the system, basically. You always, and all of us, will be returned to the creator. All of us, absolutely everyone, including the rejectors. And this is part of his divine plan, part of his magnificence, part of his law. So that marks the end of my 36-minute waffle. It's now open to questions.